there's a ton of noise out there. So how do you get decision makers to pay attention to your brand? Start a podcast and invite your ideal clients to be guests on your show. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to the B2B Growth Show. I'm your host for today's episode, Logan Lyles, Director of Partnerships here at Sweetfish Media. I am joined today by Matt Harper. He is the EVP and Managing Director at the Marketing Practice. Matt, how you doing today, man?
I'm good, Logan. How are you?
I am doing fantastic. Matt, I'm really excited to dive into this topic of the third era of demand generation. And I know you have some valuable things to share with our listeners today. Let's open it up with a little bit of background on yourself and what you guys at the Marketing Practice are up to these days.
Yeah, thanks, Logan. So my name's Matt. I'm Managing Director here at TMP. It's a bit less of a mouthful than the Marketing Practice. So we're a growth marketing agency. So what that means is we are very focused on delivering commercial financial outcomes for all of our clients, which are all B2B, mostly technology and professional services clients. Based globally, so we cover all of Europe, and I'm responsible for the Americas, and then we do some work in Asia as well. And what's I guess slightly different about what we do is we're very much focused and targeted on driving qualified pipeline, revenue, deal sizes, customer growth, really kind of commercial metrics for our clients, as opposed to slightly softer metrics, and we track all that through as well. So I guess what sort of makes us stand out, and it links with this topic we're going to talk about today, is that total accountability, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I love to hear marketers talking about that accountability. And, we've had a lot of folks on talking about sales and marketing alignment. And I think it starts with that mindset of looking at the same goals, looking at the same business drivers. So great to hear that you guys are of a similar mindset. Well, let's dive right in, Matt. We're going to be talking about this third era of demand gen. So unpack that for us. What is this third era as you guys see it?
Yes, it sounds quite dramatic, doesn't it? It sounds like some kind of historic thing. So I guess it comes from a perspective on the previous 30, 40 years of B2B marketing, where I think you'd probably term that the first era was back in the days when marketing was all about one-off, boom and bust type campaigns. And certainly when I came into marketing, it was firmly more in a kind of second era when nurture was the buzzword, talking kind of maybe 10 years ago, where everyone was talking about nurture and seeing the value of continuous, always on programs. And this third era, I guess, is characterized by the hype of the last 5 or 6 years that's been focused on particularly marketing technology and the explosion of channel selection, and that creating a different dynamic in the world of demand generation. And I think what we're seeing at the moment, and what we're spending a lot of time on with our clients, is the nature of that era maturing, and marketing teams growing accustomed to that kind of complexity. And I think in particular, a growing sense of disillusionment from some of the models that have perpetuated and been heavily promoted over recent years. A lot of companies have invested in demand centers, a lot of companies in marketing automation. And I think what we're starting to see happen is a lot of that investment maturing, and organizations really focusing on where is the real value in demand generation. And there's a couple of areas of that where I think we're seeing some of the myths being busted, and it becoming a little bit more sort of real world, I suppose. Probably the biggest one from our perspective is the whole sort of 67% of the buyer's journey being done online. That stat that's been kind of spoken at, I think, every B2B marketing event over the last few years. And I think what we're seeing at the moment is people realizing that only tells one side of the story. And as you've quite rightly pointed out at the start, it's not a true reflection of sales and marketing integration.
So I want to come back to that point of disillusionment in a bit. But before we do, Matt, one of the other myths that you mentioned as we were chatting offline was the myth of a linear sales cycle. So tell me a little bit about what you guys view there, and maybe that ties into the myth you talked about of maybe we're giving our buyers too much credit, that they are coming to the sales conversation further along than they actually are.
Yes, it's a good point, and I think I don't want to sound too cynical, and because I've definitely done it myself, where I think a way of handling some of this complexity is to look at planning programs and objectives around this linear sales cycle, where we start mapping things like content to buyers' journeys, and we do audits, and we say, right, we've got 4 pieces of content at this stage, and 3 at this stage, and none at this stage, and it all becomes very formulaic, I suppose. It's kind of like marketing by numbers. And I think what we're seeing is, that has some value in helping to organize thoughts, but in the practical world, in the real world, when you build campaigns around that journey, they're hard to really see value from. And I think that's because a lot of customers are not linear in their sales process, or in their buying process rather. Whether that's, and I know you probably have the same thing. I'm a B2B buyer myself, and it's rare that I sort of go through a formulaic process of looking at certain types of content and engaging in certain behaviors online 6 months out from purchasing, and then that differs in 3 months and differs in 1 month. It tends to be I go all over the place because I'm just trying to find information out. And I think that's what we're responding to, is that kind of serendipity of B2B marketing buyers, and the fact that it isn't linear. And in some ways that kind of inspires chaos and a bit of panic in marketers, because we want to be organized and thoughtful about that sort of thing. And I don't think it precludes us from being thoughtful about it. I think it just means that we need to be a little bit more strategic about how we plan marketing activity, and less focused on the linear buying cycle.
Yeah, I mean, I think you make a good point. When we think about our own lives, do we want more information readily at our fingertips? Do we expect to find answers online? Yes, but oftentimes we're doing some research late at night when we just put the kids to bed, and we realize, I have 5 minutes to research something. I'm going to pull out my phone and I'm going to take a look at something and maybe file that away, and then we revisit it another time after we get out of a meeting and that thing is top of mind or whatever it might be. So what you're saying, Matt, is kind of realizing that disorganization or that serendipity that's involved in kind of integrating your marketing to kind of align with that, or try and take advantage of that in some way.
Exactly. I guess it's not worrying as much about what exactly, what stage the content is at, or what stage the marketing activity is at, or what journey you're trying to force the buyer down. It's more about focusing on the quality of the experience you're giving them. I think that's where the difference lies. And we've got some really interesting, I think, use cases over recent months where we've taken a program that's been really well thought out and structured, and it's got lots of different steps and stages that buyers and customers are going to be driven through. And actually we've simplified it down and chosen maybe just a couple of focus areas where we develop some really high value but very simple content or marketing activities, and those ones outperform this kind of really well orchestrated detailed journey, because actually it's that focus on what we're saying and how we're saying it that needs to come through before before that kind of orchestration, I suppose. So it's I guess a focus on quality over quantity would be another way of putting it.
Today's growth story is all about search engine marketing. The company we're highlighting is SentinelOne. This challenger cybersecurity brand was set out to disrupt the endpoint protection space. Their brand was top-notch, their product was innovative, but they were struggling to gain traction online in an already developed industry. Then they found Directive Consulting, a B2B search marketing agency. Within the first quarter of working with Directive, SentinelOne was able to increase their organic traffic by 128% and overall lead volume by an outstanding 251%. Now, I have a hunch that Directive can get these kind of results for you too. So head over to directiveconsulting.com and request a totally free custom proposal. That's directiveconsulting.com. All right, let's get back to this interview.
So Matt, you mentioned as we were chatting offline, this rise of truly integrated marketing. I know a lot of our listeners, a lot of our guests have been talking about their ABM strategies, looking at how does account-based marketing fit into all of this as things are changing and they look at a different way to approach demand gen. What have you guys been seeing in the market or with some of your clients that are taking an account-based marketing approach and how that fits into this conversation?
So I have a theory about account-based marketing, which is part of the reason for its rise is in response to exactly what we were talking about at the start of the call. And I think people feeling like they're not getting the results from the scaled approach to driving demand that they were hoping for. Mm-hmm. And I think what appeals to people in ABM is that as you say, that integration and orchestration. It's the idea that, okay, we're approaching very small markets of one account or small groups of accounts or even individuals in those accounts. And we're saying we're going to integrate lots of different channels, different activities with some very single-minded messaging. And I think, without meaning to be reductive, I think to an extent that's just really good marketing. And I think that's what people are seeing in it is that kind of, it starts to feel like something we should all be doing. And actually that's why we're zoning in on account-based marketing. It's not necessarily for the sake of doing ABM or because it's particularly new or different. I think it's just that it's a slight revolt to this broader kind of context of marketing not necessarily delivering what it needs to. And I think that's great. I think what the approach should be that we do more account-based marketing in B2B, but I think we also should take the principles from account-based marketing and apply them more broadly. We should also be thinking about, our scaled demand generation using some of those integrated principles to achieve more at a larger scale. But I would certainly say, if I think about the last year, I'd say probably 50% of the client conversations that I've had, and particularly new client conversations, have been about ABM because it seems to be what everyone's zoning in on.
Mm-hmm. And do you find that clients are actually bringing up that the conversation and the topic around ABM rather than you guys starting it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's at that stage where people are. There's very few organizations that are doing it really well. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a lot of organizations which, particularly driven from the top of the organizations, they're saying, I've heard about this thing ABM, I've gone to a few conferences and people have shown me these absolutely, amazing results in terms of, the ROI they're delivering. Mm-hmm. And I think we should be doing it. And then they're giving it down to the organization and saying, right, someone needs to figure out how we do this. So I think it's at that stage where people are, I think there's still a lot of organizations kind of floundering to figure out how they do it. They're not sure where it sits, whether it sits in, the field marketing team, if it sits in some kind of central marketing team, how people go about doing it. But that's why I think a lot of those conversations are coming about, is because there's a lot of it being driven from the top down of marketing leaders saying they need to look at it.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned something that was interesting there, Matt. You mentioned that there are parts of ABM that are just good marketing, and there are concepts and approaches that could be applied to all of your marketing efforts and your demand gen. What are some of those that really stand out to you?
I think one would be having the really targeted and focused messaging. And really thinking about it from a customer first point of view. And I think ABM to an extent can take that to an extreme, in that you can be targeting one single organization, but I think the methodology you go through and the thinking you go through to put yourself in the customer's world, to really heavily research the customer's world, and then to extrapolate what value you can bring to them, and then replay it to them in their own language. That process, for anyone that's been through it, is really interesting, and it does make you think differently about how you market than when you're doing the more kind of inside out driven marketing. So I think that would be one thing, would be how we target and create messaging. And then I think probably another area would be then in the execution. It's the tight integration of different aspects. One of the things that we get a lot of value from is taking some of the newer channels, social activity, driving a lot of awareness into accounts, very very sort of small groups of accounts through social, through digital activity, but then closely integrating that with data, and then with even something like inside sales follow up, where you have people that are making phone calls into the prospect organization using the data and the intelligence and things that we've driven from some of that broader digital activity. When you kind of bring those things together, I think it becomes really powerful. It can be quite difficult to do, in all honesty. It isn't easy, but I think when you do bring them together, you see the efficiency and the effectiveness really kind of take off.
So Matt, let's talk a little bit about the technology. We've talked about integrating data points and different things and looking at what is your field marketing team doing, your account-based marketing approach, how that ties with your inside sales team. One of the things I know you wanted to touch on was intent data and some of the other new trends, new additions to the marketer's tech stack these days. We did a previous episode on this show talking about how we as a podcast agency are using tools like Bombora with their plugin to Crunchbase to look at intent data. Tell us a little bit about where you see some organizations leveraging that and maybe some other pieces to their tech stack in this next generation of demand gen.
I think it's a really good one. I think the intent data thing in particular is like a microcosm for this shift from the second era to the third era, in that it's kind of realizing the dream of what marketing automation providers and other vendors were putting out there a few years ago, where they were saying, you create these campaigns and people hand raise and they qualify themselves and they get these lead scores that shows you they want to buy and all this, that, and the other. I think what intent data does is it provides a far more qualified view on that, and I think that's where we're seeing some really strong results out of it, in that it's not just based on a journey that we've taken a customer or prospect through and channels that we've driven. It's based on data that comes from, whether it's Google, whether it's other kind of search engines or broader market data that says where there are organizations based on their IP that are looking for certain things, trending around certain topics. And the way that we use that data is, to start with, it's really simple. For example, we'll monitor a bunch of organizations, and the person who is responsible for the inside sales activity for that segment, they will get pinged when there's kind of trends around certain organizations and certain keywords. So let's say a prospect account starts pinging for cybersecurity, and that's one of our clients' proposition areas. They will then go in and do some research. They'll find some of the cybersecurity kind of contacts that we've got in our database. They might put together a specific email with a writer that talks about our value proposition around that. They'll put in a few phone calls. They'll keep it very light touch. They'll say, they won't go in and say, I know that you've been searching for cybersecurity, but they'll go in and say, want to know if this is of interest to you. We're doing a lot of work in your market at the moment. I've got some experts I could line you up with to talk about, how we're approaching these challenges. And actually, what we're seeing is that improves the hit rate 2 or 3 times in relation to the leads and the opportunities that are being driven from that. And I don't think that's difficult to do. That's not kind of really complex orchestration. That's something very simple. That's a case of just giving a person full accountability for that data and giving them the information to use it, and then tracking how they use it.
Yeah, I think it's a very big lever that a lot of organizations can use to simply get some more leverage, because what is marketing's dream? Saying the right thing to the right person at the right time, and that timing aspect has always been a very tough thing to nail. But with the use of intent data that goes beyond just how is a buyer engaging with our brand, but what are these buyers or these organizations, what are they doing? Give me a broader picture of this scattered serendipitous journey, as you kind of put it, Matt. Let me see that full picture. And as we can do that, then we can respond accordingly, hopefully not too creepily, as you said, avoiding the big brother. Hey, we noticed you were searching Google for this term. We want to talk to so-and-so, right?
Exactly. And I think that's, the intent data thing is a slightly more tactical use case, but I think it's representative of that broader theme, which I think is seeing some of the technologies that we've talked about for a long time actually understand how they fit into the marketing stack. And it's really staying close to the principles. As you say, it's all about right person, right time, right message. Those principles are still the same. It's just that some of the tools we have changed. And I think that's what we're realizing now, which is a little bit different to where we were a few years ago, where I think, a lot of people were trying to reinvent marketing and what it was all about, and invested a lot of time and money in that. And now I think it's realizing we have everything we need to be successful. And, we're now seeing that come to fruition, which I think is really positive for our market. I just think we need to have more confidence about that.
I love it. Well, Matt, this has been a great conversation. If anybody listening to this would like to learn more about TMP or follow up with you, ask any questions, what's the best way for them to reach out and go about doing that?
Yeah, I'd love to hear directly from people. I'd love to get some opinions and viewpoints, from different worlds. So email me directly. My email address is mharper@themarketingpractice.com, and I'll also make sure that you and I connected on LinkedIn, Logan, so that if people want to search for me via that, they can do that as well.
Absolutely. Well, Matt, I really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your perspective with folks. I think you've added a ton of value to our listeners, and thank you again for coming on the show.
Thanks, Logan. Take care.
Digital marketing agencies have a tough job. You have to stay on top of the latest marketing strategies for your clients and your agency. What if there was a way you could address both at the same time? Imagine your agency putting out content with greater quality and quantity. Envision bringing your clients a turnkey solution for one of B2B marketing's fastest growing media strategies, podcasting. All those clients asking for your help with their account-based marketing efforts? Picture being the first to bring them the idea of content-based networking, showing them the proven strategy for breaking into their most coveted accounts. Here's the concept. Sweetfish Media is looking to work with a limited number of innovative agencies interested in a new partnership model. We produce a podcast for your agency. You introduce the power of podcasting and Sweetfish services to your clients. Everybody wins. Learn more at sweetfishpartners.com.